Now, onwards with the discussion. Who was the last person who said something?
I was about to.
Yeah.
You're about to. Take the mic. Enjoy.
I was just going to say that I drastically disagree with almost everything that was said. And my reasoning is based upon what language is and what art is. And I think that there's a lot of overlap and a lot of dissimilarity in that a language is any system that conveys meaning, and art is the expression of a thought or idea. And while those are very similar, art does not necessarily have to have a system, and a language does. And in relation to culture, seeing as what a language is, it does not necessarily imply any subjective communication. It could be entirely objective, such as flight commands in the military, with which I'm intimately familiar, or shot calling in the military. There is absolutely zero subjective output. It is all completely objective. And while some people would argue that it is not a language of its own, it certainly is, because nobody here would understand it. But almost everyone in the military would, and all meanings would be conveyed in a very systematic format, like a language.
This is a linguistic response to that. And I do have some sort of background here. I got a BA in linguistics from Berkeley and a master's in linguistics from UCSD. That is not a language. Think about it, it is systematic, but I'm afraid that's not all there is to a language. A nice definition that I like is a language is a creative, recursive system of communication used within a community. You can delete the used within a community and you get a conlang, it's one that isn't spoken. But the words creative and recursive have very specific meanings here. So one example that I always like to give when I explain this to my English students all the time is NFL calls. So there are rules, it's a system and it has a definite meaning. So that, you know, they say something like, you know, what's that mean? Any NFL? Darn, no sports fans here. This personal foul, face mask on the offense or defense, whichever way I'm pointing, and then he'll say something like 15-yard penalty, 4th down. And they actually have a great number system there. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's a system, and it definitely can't be confused, and it has a very specific meaning. But it's not a language because, first of all, it's not creative. And what I mean by creative is this. Any language that you have has a way of creating new words. So for example, just take Google as an English verb, for example. We had the site Google, pretty soon we had the verb Google. And we got for free things like Google, Googles, Googled, Googling, Googler, somebody who Googles.
Or works at Google.
Google, Wikipedia. What was that? That was a great example. Googling Wikipedia. Wow, that was hilarious. But the idea here is there is some sort of system built in. It doesn't necessarily need to be a system of affixes per se, but there's a system built in to create new words. And that's something that's inherent in every single language that's ever existed. Another one is recursion, and I don't want this to break off into a discussion of Piraha. But the basic idea is this. In Absalom, William Faulkner's wonderful novel, I think it was a prequel to Sound and Fury, there's this sentence that's 34 pages long. It begins at some point, it continues for about 20 pages, then the chapter ends right in the middle of the sentence, mind you. In fact, in the middle of a parenthetical sentence within that sentence. And then the next chapter begins in the middle of the sentence, and it keeps going for about another 10 pages, the parenthesis ends, then it goes for a few more pages, and then it stops. All right. There was a Guinness Book of World Records at the time that kept track of the longest sentence, and that was in as the longest sentence in English. You know, it was a world record. Then a linguist wrote it, very smart aleck linguist, and says, I have a longer sentence than that. And the guy said, oh, really? Well, let's hear it. And his sentence was, I wrote, comma, quotes, that entire sentence. I got a longer one than that. I said I wrote, and so on. The man said I wrote. So that's the idea of recursion. That seems to be a crucial aspect of the language that distinguishes it from a different type of system. And a lot of the ones that people like to compare it to are like the calling systems of the vervet monkeys or the bee dances. That's a great one. And there's gosh, I wish I could show you this, but bee dances have very specific ways of showing you if there's a food source nearby, how big it is, in what direction you need to get there, and whether you need more than one person to go get that food source or something like that. And this is, and it's very specific. It works with cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, insofar as how far away it is. So these researchers, or torturers, depending on how you look at it, created this great big food source, and they put it directly above the beehive. And then they sent one bee out to go and look at it, and he gets excited, oh my God, look at all this food. And he goes back to the hive, and he has to try to communicate to the hive that there's a food source that's enormous directly above them, and shut down. He went nuts. He's all really, 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 really big, really, 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 really close. And they're like, okay, what direction? And it was kind of beyond the bee system. So this is not an artistic or a philosophical definition of language. This is a linguistic definition. You can take issue with that definition, certainly, but it's one that most linguists accept. But the question of art is different.
What I'm going to argue is what then is your purpose for this system?
Oh, for which system?
For the system of language, what is the purpose?
Does it need to have a purpose?
My opinion.
Well, just
For a definition, it should have a purpose.
well, just to throw something out there, I'm not going to go into this because it's just going to, there's this idea of language as tool, natural language as tool. One of the things that they've shown, and the pragmatist gives this, guys like Grice, just fantastic work they've done, is that language, the idea is language is a tool for communication. Well, it's not necessarily the case, and one of the prime examples is small talk, and questions that you don't care about the answer to. How you doing? Good. How's your wife? Great. How many kids you have, and so on. They fulfill a purpose, but it's not necessarily some sort of a pragmatic purpose. It's more of a social purpose, in a way, if you want to define that as a goal. Anyway, we could talk for ages and ages about this, and this is just the new. Let's try to pass it around.
I had a question for a while back.
Yeah, no, Jeff has had a question, actually. Jeff's had a question for a while.
But just first, I want to say that my definition of language comes from computation theory, so it's bound to be radically different from anybody else's. Anyway, the mention of craft earlier, one thing I've tried to do is do a lot of different sketches. I mean, art students are always sketching things, so I've tried to do that with Parlance, try different kinds of languages and inflected and agglutinative, different typologies, different phonologies, and it's an exercise. I figured, that's what most kinds of art do. A composer doesn't spend decades working on a single symphony. He does a whole bunch. Mozart did over 40 and fewer years than that, and along with a bunch of other things. And same with graphic artists. Maybe playwrights don't do quite so many, if only because they need to have a lot of financial backing for each one. But that's my approach to commenting.
Going back to Brad's thesis and David's antithesis, I'll try some synthesis if I can. It seems to me that he has a valid point that works of art and languages are different types of entity. That a language is a means of expressing something, and a work of art is an expression of something. It seems maybe we can look at it as individual languages, whether natural or constructed, are more like media than they are like individual works of art within those media. So, for instance, English and Huckleberry Finn are on two different levels. Yazimban and a story I've written in Yazimban are on two different levels analogically. And similarly, oil painting and somebody pictured a famous oil painting, I don't know offhand.
The Mona
Let's say
Lisa.
oil or watercolor or whatever. Or similarly, analogically on the same two levels. Or sculpture and a particular individual sculpture.
I have a response to that, sort of elaboration on that. I have something of an elaboration on that. I think that one thing that is really interesting about conlining is that it's not so much oil painting, and the creation of oil painting as a genre isn't seen as a work of art. And it's the association that I would make is actually more to printmaking and paper making, where printmaking has often been a craft that was done as an art. Paper making was usually been done as a craft that was done as a skill or commodity. But in at least recently known to me, but I'm sure throughout the ages, paper making itself has become more of a component of art. So that you'll find people who are producing handmade paper and selling that as its own craft. And I think some of what we're doing is promoting the creation of paper that stories are built on. The language is sort of that idea of the structure, and turning that into art is something that is really interesting to me. I remember telling Dennis in 1995, hey, I've heard of this thing called conlining, and being the young esprogist that he was at the time, saying, why would you do that?
This is just a very possible short counter. So we have James Joyce, right? Now, one of the things that James Joyce was known for was creating these fantastic portmanteaux. He started, with his earlier works and then just went absolutely nuts with it. It was kind of great. I would say that some of those portmanteaux in themselves are an expression. Now, if you define art as a form of expression, then I think it's up to the artist to decide what is the expression and what isn't. That's pretty subjective, but then art is pretty subjective as well. Anyway, that was just an example I thought of. I'll throw that out there. And if you want to see a great example of a portmanteau, just go to the borders down there, get Finnegan's Wake, open to the first page, and there is this portmanteau for the word thunder. And it just stretches over all these lines, and it's a combination. And one even wonders what he's doing here. If you're not familiar, it's a combination of the roots for thunder in, 15, 16 different languages, all smashed together. And it's like, what is this? It's supposed to just give you the feeling of thunder. It's got a lot of piece and pieces in it as well.
I guess it's also about time. Going to your definition where art is an expression, which is an acceptable definition, but the truth is what an expression is depends on the intention of a creative act. So we have works of art which are actually instructions for how you might do something, or musical compositions which have absolutely no specification of the sound. They say that you're going to put 15 people in the room with radios, which are that's John Cage. There's a whole variety of different things. Now, why does John Cage get all this ink and me playing with broken radios in my house doesn't get anything? It's partly a social environment, and it's partly the craft with which he has actually presented the concept and justified it as an art. And I think the truth is that a conlang may or may not be a piece of art, depending on what someone's doing, and it may have very different objectives each time, and we should think about that. But it is true that we have to pack up so many things. I'm just so glad that I helped do this because you guys are all fantastic. And I didn't know what this event would be like, and I just personally want to say that I'm just really happy to have you guys here in Providence. And we can do it again in Providence sometime. I would be happy to.
I also think we should thank again David and Si. For their incredible energy, but their patience and diplomacy in getting us all together.
Yes, a little bit
And
of
you too,
diplomacy is
and for
required.
your husband's help.
So yeah, thank you all. I hope you had a great time.